Okay, everybody, it's Wednesday, April 30th, 2025, and we are going to do a part four on these mysterious angles. I've had so many experiences in media. In fact, my very first appearance on the Art Bell Show was in the year 2001 in the spring, and it's a very interesting story because my the producer of the Art Bell Show, Lisa Lyon, called me up. I had never been on the show before. This is my very first, public appearance. And there's going to be 30 million people on the show. And she calls me up to interview me, to pre-interview me for the Art Bell Show. And we're talking about the meetings I had just had with Christ in Topanga Canyon, where he was shining innumerably brighter than our sun. I mean, it just seems the intensity of the light coming off of Christ was so powerful. I don't know what it did to my magnetic field, but she's talking to me, and all of a sudden, it's the power just went out in the station where she was interviewing me at Coast to Coast AM Premier Radio Networks. And so they're they're basically previewing me to be on the show, and Lisa is saying every single phone line, all the power is out in the station except for this phone that I'm talking to you on. And she wrote that in the Art Bell After Dark newsletter. Well, then I get on the show, which is quite a bit later, and I'm on the show and I'm with James Oberg, and we're arguing about the UFOs on the NASA Space Shuttle videos. And we're in the middle of this heated debate. And all of a sudden, boom, 30 million people. Art had the biggest show in history, really. I don't think anybody's ever beaten those numbers, not even Joe Rogan today. The show was gone. We were cut off the air. And all of a sudden, I hear this very strange static. And there's an old recording of Michio Kaku talking about parallel universes that can be an inch away from us, and we don't see them because they're on the other side of this hidden dimension. And it's really noisy and staticky. And I counted 4.2 minutes later, we're back. And Art just says, what the heck just happened? He said in the history of his show, this outage had only happened two times. And so we continue with this debate about the NASA UFOs. So the point is there's an outage at Premier Radio Networks before me being pre-interviewed, and a massive outage during the show. And the next day, when he plays his intro music, Art Bell had taken energy readings in the valley where his massive antenna, which is kitty corner to Area 51 actually, was situated. And he said literally there were energy readings and microwave readings up and down the valley that were so powerful. He had never seen anything like it. And the satellite, it turns out, the satellite was knocked out. So I saw yesterday about the power outage. What's interesting about the power outage is in Europe is, yes, we've had large power outages before, but they're explainable. What's interesting about the power outage in Spain and Portugal is it just happens to run along the line of the here, let me just point this out, of the, here it is in my share screen. We can see that I had only a week before put these videos out on Facebook, and I think I got over 1,500 views on one of the interviews about this, and showing how the Jesus line, which again, the line to the east, running through Bethlehem and the place of Jesus's baptism being 26.3 degrees, which is the angle of ascension inside of the Great Pyramid, which I'll go through in a minute. And to the west, where this hyperdimensional planet sets, runs right through the village of Fatima, Portugal, where in 19 17, October 13th, the miracle of the sun occurred. So this is the epicenter of the outage, which still has not been explained. And according to space weather, there were no solar events or geo-electrical events that caused the outage because there was none. There was apparently like the Art Bell show, um, blackout, which actually blacked out the satellite for me, was a different story, in that there were these huge energy readings that in on the ground. So you have a satellite in space being taken out, and then you have energy readings on the ground that take out the ground-based system. So Art Bell said there were two systems taken out: his ground-based system, which is an internet-based system, and the space satellite, all taken out when I was on that show. And so therefore, you say that these outages coincide with what I'm doing. So I see this, whether this outage eventually gets explained properly, it still coincides with the presentation of the angle to explain, which has never been explained. Fatima and what appears to be an annular ring eclipse to the witnesses below is preceded by the Mother Mary appearing on this line to the three village children of Fatima to tell them and prepare them. She appears on the 13th of May, 1917, and on the 13th of every month leading up to the event. Now, when she appeared, there were orbs, crystal balls of white that were witnessed that apparently she came out of. And again, those appearances occurred at this same angle. So, coincidence or not, it coincides. Coincidence or not, it coincides. And that is incredibly interesting. So, do we get signature messages from above? Is this playing out from above? Because I think what's really going on here is something is telling us from above that this is all happening, that we live in a hyperdimensional solar system, and like the ancient Egyptians knew, in the Aeneid system, there were multiple planets that we have not understood because our view of science has limited us to the solar system we have. In fact, the view of science at the time of Ptolemy in his model of the solar system was a seven-planet solar system, and eventually we add Uranus and Neptune, Pluto, and Eris, Gong, all these other planets that are in the model, and then all the way to Nibiru with the calculation I received that we've gone over before. We can see the orbital periods of all the further outmost region planets. But also, Adnet here was in Egypt recently, and I want to show, because the famous what people think are light bulbs in in Hathor's temple, she's saying, where she took these photographs. I couldn't measure the angle of these two bulbs. Notice there's two of them. It'd be really nice, and I forgot to ask you this, to get the orientation in the temple north, south, east, west of these angles, because I'll demonstrate it in a minute in the Great Pyramid, and then we'll go to the rising and setting sun model, that this angle was confirmed with a protractor by a net in person is the 26-degree angle. And so you see that they are in alignment with something at 26.3 degrees and pointing in both directions, coming off of both directions. This gets really interesting and spellbinding because there are going to be a lot of these 26-degree angles, and they're not going to be easily explained. So when I go to the model in the pyramids, we go to the pyramids, And first, I should point out, just for the record, um, Le Mesurier is the one, Peter Le Mesurier, who discovered the Bethlehem angle at summer solstice from the Great Pyramid at the bottom left, runs right through the birthplace of Jesus. And the Jordan River crossing here, which I verified in Google Earth, is precisely the location where John the Baptist is stationed and where he's baptizing literally thousands of people over the years. And he baptizes Jesus Christ right here at this location. So again, that's the angle that the Egyptians knew to to establish the angle of the bulbs at Hathor's temple. So when you come to inside the pyramid, I just want to go inside the pyramid for a second, and we can see the here it is, pyramid diagram. The prevailing theory in Tompkins' book on the Great Pyramid of Egypt is the opening of the descending passage is facing north, and it's right here where my cursor is. And the light of the pole star at the time entered the shaft, which is descending at 26.3 degrees. And the theory is there is a reflective pool of water right at this junction that would split the light beam. So part of the light would go down at 26.3 degrees. Notice that this is an ascending angle to the North Star, and the beam would split here and go south. This is south, up the Grand Gallery at 26.3 degrees and leading to the junction of the Queen's Chamber here and the King's Chamber here, what is called. And that these two chambers measure identically to the tabernacle of Moses, Holy of Holies, was 10 by 10 cubits, which is within the accuracy of the Queen's Chamber square base. So it is a Holy of Holies. When Moses transported the Ark of the Covenant and the staff, they were placed in the Holy of Holies, and it was a tent. At the time of Solomon, the measurements doubled. The king's chamber being 10 by 20 cubits is the same measurement as Moses's holy place tent, where the menorah, the seven candle menorah, was placed, and other holy artifacts. So why are these measurements the same if this temple is not God's lost temple from the book of Isaiah, chapter 19? So this is to establish that the 26 degrees goes to the North Star, but what is it pointing at in the southern direction? Well, watch what happens. We're going to go to a software that was pointed out to me based on an article that a researcher had done on the rising and setting sun, which you can place anywhere on the earth. Notice it says this page cannot load Google Maps correctly, and that's because this is a software in development, so it's only good for local regions. A human being standing 6 feet tall as I am can see on a perfectly flat horizon. I think it's about 3 miles before you reach the curvature of the earth or the horizon. So we don't really see very far unless we're up on a mountain. So that would mean that your rising and setting points to the eye are not really very far, about 6 or 7 miles across, on a flat plane. Of course, if you have mountains, you're not going to see very far at all. But the point is, this software will map the angle of the rising and setting sun. So up here, I have my date, and I can go to summer solstice, the 22nd of June on the current calendar, and notice my angle changed on my base. And yes, with a protractor, that angle happens to be about 27 degrees actually. And the setting angle, the orange line, is the same. The bright orange line. The pale orange line here is the current time of day. So what this means is I can look with this calculator up here for the date. I can go to the date of Fatima. And the date of Fatima is October 13th. Um, I got it. It's not letting me, it will let me do it. I just have to do this. I have to delete the current date. And I have to go to, that's now, here it is. April, March, February, January, December, November, October 13th. And you notice down here at the Great Pyramid that the angle of the sun does not explain Fatima because the angle of the sun here sets below. If I move my time clock here, you see that's about the angle of the setting sun there at the time of Fatima. In fact, I can change it to the year 1917, and it's not going to make any difference. So the sun's angle during the event. Now, this arc here is actually not very accurate because it's much steeper than that. For the angle being presented. Again, this is the software in development. So this would mean that the angle was not on display at the moment of the miracle of the sun at Fatima. So that means there's another body in the solar system at play responsible. Now, if I go back to my clock here, I'm going to go, and again, we're situated at the Giza Plateau, pronounced Giza Plateau for the local Arabs only. The rest of the Arab world pronounces it Giza, as in Jesus, which is the master stone builder. So let's go to December the 22nd, which is the winter solstice. Okay, so now when we go to this is the position here of the Giza Plateau at the winter solstice. It's within 26 degrees for the rising. Oop, I just moved my cursor. I have to put it back. And the way you do it, you can go to this software yourself. It's called suncalc.net, and you just have to click on your target and it will show you. All I have to do is move my time clock here to the time. There you go. There's the rising sun. And if I check that with my protractor, I'm within the angle of the 26.3 to 27 degree line on a protractor. Yeah, that's right. So that means that again you have the two bulbs at Hathor temporal pointing in both directions of on the axis of 26 degrees, and they're pointing the incoming descending passage is coming from the north up here, and the ascending passage is pointing to the south down here. So we have 26 degrees pointing north, 26 degrees off of the plane heading south, and on your east-west axis, the direction of the rising sun, you're 26 degrees at the winter solstice, and the summer solstice. Again, we'll go back to our summer just so you can see this. Summer is June 22nd. You see, it goes back up. And again, you have to change your time to when that's the sun setting. And then we have to go to, you see the little orange one in the bottom is moving according to, there you go. Click this off here. This is your 26 degrees um, in the east and 26 degrees in the west. So this only works on the solstice. But we have four sets of demonstrated in the pyramid of this mysterious angle that Jesus is born at and he's baptized at, and the miracle of the sun at Fatima is set at. The problem is, if I even go to, let's go to the birth date of Christ here on the current calendar, and I'm going to check both. So let's go to December the 25th, and December the 25th for the rising sun in Egypt. I am going, because I'm right near winter solstice, I am going to be 26 degrees below, but he's born at 26 degrees above. So this can't have to do with the rising sun being responsible for the mystery of the 26 degrees. Now, if I go to January 7th, which is the Orthodox Church, it changes just a little bit. And that's because the 2 points of these angles, yeah, I'm at about 24 degrees now on the east for the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is the oldest church. I mean, I could argue that the very oldest church is the Egyptian church because Christ as a child is brought by his parents at the advice of the angel into the land of Egypt. But you have to understand at the time of Moses, where Jesus was born in what became the Palestine was Egypt. So he was actually born in old Egypt, and then the borders changed by the time Alexander the Great conquers the region, and then eventually the Romans conquer the region. So we have a very complex situation here because the Coptics churches in Egypt are established in all the different places where Jesus in the Giza Plateau, as it's really pronounced, meaning stone master stone builder, and in the book of Acts where Jesus declares himself the missing chief stone, not the cornerstone if you read the original Greek, the missing chief stone, which is the top stone of the Great Pyramid. He declares he is the chief top stone. So that we were deluded by placing it to the corner because the corner of a temple is the notation of the Masonic masters when they build a temple. They set the chief cornerstone. And the chief cornerstone is not the headstone, the chief stone on the top. So Jesus in the book of Acts is actually referring to himself. Obviously, as a child, we can see the map of where the Holy Family lived and stayed during 4 years of his childhood is right in front of the Great Pyramid, which at the time would have been covered with its original beautiful white limestone 144,000 casing stones, which is where the 144,000 in the book of Revelation comes from. So this is really incredible because we don't have the answer of why 26 degrees is north, south, east, and west, when initially in Tompkins' book it was resolved to be the angle of the pole star, which is right now Polaris. And your pole star, 24 hours a day, is at its axis point, whereas the sun is rising and setting, the planets are rising and setting. So we can see from suncalc.net that we can look at the rising and setting of the sun, and therefore the planets being in the ecliptic of the sun are going to follow along this line, but we don't know what caused the miracle of the sun at Fatima and what is John the Baptist's camp, where, uh, again, let me just go to the other map to clarify this because it just gets more and more spellbinding. And then I'm going to show you something very new. Okay, so if we go here and we understand the rising sun. And that's how Peter Le Mesurier discovered the Bethlehem angle, because the shadow cast by the three pyramids, actually, because they're all almost exactly the same angle, their angle is very slightly different, very, very slightly different. And we can see the 26-degree line is this lower yellow line here, heading east where Christ is born, and all the way out here is pointing to something rising on the eastern horizon where planets and stars rise. And the idea of the Star of Bethlehem being the planet Jupiter, is one theory, would not rise on this line on his said birthday at all. So it certainly wouldn't. But at the time of, and I need to check this, that's another check I have to do, is looking at the rising and setting of the planets during his said birth are going to be way below are going to be 26 degrees in the opposite direction. Now, I want you to note, if I add 26 degrees, this triangle here, if I put 26 degrees down here, way down here, I'm actually going to get fairly close to the traditional Mount Sinai, which is down here. We've already covered in the inner circle the angles and the harmony of the order to the three different Sinais. But if I add 26 degrees down here, my total angle will be 52 degrees, because 26 and 26 is 52, which is pretty much the angle of the three pyramids being just a shaving under the 52 degrees. So again, that is incredibly interesting, because when you add two of them together, you come to, here it is, my three pyramids angle study again. This is important now because we know what's underneath the three pyramid complex are these massive, supermassive coil structures. So when we look here, the three pyramids, we see again how we get our next angle, which is the resurrection angle. And the resurrection angle is for the ancient Egyptians, I'll show a graphic in a minute, between 38 and 39 degrees, closer to 38 than 39. So if we take the angle of Khufu's pyramid, 51.853972 degrees, this is really precise, to a lot of decimals, and I subtract from 90 degrees, I'm left over with 38.146 degrees, which is within the angle of resurrection. And if I go to Khafre's pyramid, where the central coils are situated underneath of it, and from 90 degrees, I subtract its angle, 51.84, I'm left with 38.16. You see, I'm between 38 and 39 degrees, but I'm closer to 38 degrees. And Menkar's pyramid, subtract its angle from 90 degrees, 51.340, 278. I'm really close to 39 degrees, actually, on Menkar's pyramid. So again, why the varying angles on the three pyramids? Because they're built consecutively to track in the heavens at their surface angle to the north, to the south, to the east and west, something that we don't know about in the heavens at this angle at all. Because at this angle, we don't have a rising sun at any time of the year. And this is where it gets really interesting, because when we establish this and we look at okay, so I'm going to go to the Osiris. Now this is from this graphic I'm about to show. It's kind of funny. We've shown it in the inner circle before. The angle that the god Osiris is laying at, and of course this is a cloth pictogram, so the accuracy is not phenomenal, but he's between 38 and 39 degrees, which is your leftover angle at 90 degrees. And the reason that's important is his anti-angle, which is the angle of his phallus, is the angle of the Great Pyramid, 51.853972 degrees. So why is this? Why does he know? Why do the ancient Egyptians know about the resurrection angle from the Great Pyramid complex, being that where resurrected beings appear? Because you're going to see that Jesus appears and the Mother Mary appears on this angle that the ancient Egyptians knew. So again, people see a Charlton Heston movie and they think that God doesn't like Egypt, yet God sent Jesus to be raised in Egypt, and Moses is trained in all things Egyptian. Do we really know the story correctly? His problem was with Pharaoh, because Pharaoh wanted to be God and Pharaoh was not God. There was nothing written in the Bible that said God had anything against the people of Egypt and their understanding of the cosmos. So the phallus can represent birth, the creation of a child coming in at this sacred angle, or life and death being the antithesis of each other, which is why there's these two angles are equal and opposite of each other. And I want to point out with my hands here. So if I'm standing on the Giza Plateau and I'm looking north, if I put my arm up at 38 degrees, 38 degrees, the off of the top 38 degrees, my arm is actually at pyramid angle. And if I turn it in to produce my cone on my east-west, the pyramid facing north is looking at something that rises at 38, 39 degrees to the east, and at its high point is the angle of the Great Pyramid. In fact, the angle of the Great Pyramid is always at the edge of this cone, because 38 degrees off of the top at 90 degrees is the Great Pyramid angle, because that's the leftover between the two. You see, if I turn my arm sideways here, and this is 38 degrees, my arm is at 52 degrees, right? And the Great Pyramid is just a shaving under 52 degrees. In fact, some people place it at 52 degrees because they don't do the work precisely, which means it's tracking something in the heavens on its outer edge face. And the three pyramids change angle over time and are built at different periods in time because of the slight change of the angle, which is duly noted over these great periods of time. So when we come to the understanding of that, let's go back to this for a second, the inside of the pyramid. And we come back to the inside of the pyramid. You are seeing that this slice here of the angle of ascension is pointing to the south. receiving the pole star from the north at 26 degrees. And on its side, the rising and setting sun at 26 degrees on summer solstice, and winter solstice, the same angle flips to the south. So the very fact that the same angle flips to the south tells you a lot, because the angle of ascent is pointing to the south. So all of these quadrants in the heavens at these angles need to be examined for what they're really tracking. Because the miracle of the sun at Fatima and now the great power outage of 2025. Now, notice, I want to go back to the power outage just for a second. This is really important because it's in Easter window. And what is Easter? The resurrection. Okay, so the date for the power outage, you see, this is where the power outage is. Again, it could be a manifestation of consciousness, even if it's human error. A human is part of an interface of consciousness. So you have to understand that the date, so let's just go, because we have time here, just for the record. The date and time of the power outage in Spain, very interesting how these things are timed. Timed, I can say timed 3 times because it is timed. The 28th of April, 2025, at 11:33 West, 10:33 Universal Time Code, 12:33 Standard Eastern Time is when it occurred. Now, if I Google here, because that is April the 28th, when will Easter, what year will Easter fall on April 28th? The year 2030 will be Julian Easter. So that's Orthodox, right? So if I click on this, April 28th, 2019, in the Orthodox Church, of course, that's back in time. Easter was on April 28th. And that is my point. It happened inside of the Easter window of the lunar calendar, which is a repetitive cycle that looks like a sine wave like this. And if you look through the pipe of the sine wave, the actual Easter occurred on the solar calendar on a very specific date that is trackable, even though our calendar migrates. That's why your Orthodox Church, which celebrates Christmas in Egypt on January the 7th and the 8th every year on the current calendar, and the Western churches and Catholic is December 25th, which is 3 days after the winter solstice. So the two of them are actually in synchronicity with something. So the point is, the power outage occurred on an Easter resurrection. So let's go date. Now let's go back to, so people really understand what resurrection angle really means, because now that we've established really clearly the resurrection angle, really clearly is the blue line here, is 38 to 39 degrees to the east. And this is exactly where, on this line, the Church of Zaytun in Egypt, these incredible apparitions of allegedly the Mother Mary, although she doesn't speak and announce herself, people believe it was the Mother Mary. So this is the Zaytun Church. You can see it's just a little bit off of my angle to the east, which means it's within that angle where she appeared. And just for the record, for people who don't know this, because a lot of people don't know this because they were born. I mean, I was born in 1961. So when the Mother Mary appeared in Egypt at that location, at resurrection angle in her resurrected body that people could see, she was photographed hundreds of times. Over 2 million people saw her. And yes, there were UAP in the sky above her. But I'll go to those pictures in a minute, because when you go to here, and we went through this last week, Jesus, when he resurrects, first appears within this angle here where he is crucified and resurrected, but then jumps at the end of this angle, the 38 to 39 degree angle, and he appears again. This is where Mary Magdalene's family, who owned the fishing vessels in the Sea of Galilee, this is where Jesus appears 3 times to the apostles in the Sea of Galilee in his resurrected body. Remember, the god Osiris is laying at this angle of between 38 and 39 degrees as resurrection angle. So why did the Egyptians know, and why is Jesus appearing at this angle where the Magdala temple was discovered? This is a very recent discovery, the Magdala temple complex. You see, you have the Magdala chapel here. You have the remains of the temple, which contained its own Holy of Holies at a Solomonic measurement, which doubles the measurement of Moses's original holy place and Holy of Holies. But this is where Jesus is appearing, and the apostles catch the 153 fish, which numerically is the name Mary Magdalene, and numerologically. And so why is Jesus appearing in his resurrected body here at this angle, and the Mother Mary appears at this angle? And then when I take this angle to the setting line to the west, where something is setting in the west, which is this blue line here. And Mary Magdalene is thrown in her boat with her followers, some of the remnant followers of Jesus Christ, and in her boat with no rudder and a sail, being sent to die out in the Mediterranean here. And she goes on her boat, and following this blue double yellow line, her boat stops here in what would later become France. Notice also that France was part of the Great Power Outage. There were some parts of France that were affected by the power outage. Right, I need to get the actual location. Here's Bordeaux, France, right here. This is where Mary Magdalene got off her ship with her disciples, and allegedly even the children of Christ and Mary Magdalene. Clearly, Pope Gregory I misnamed her the prostitute, and Pope Paul VI in 19. It's interesting that Pope Paul VI corrects that Mary Magdalene is not the prostitute in 1968 or 69, which is when the apparitions of Mary appeared in Zaytun. And again, following this resurrection angle, I'm not changing the angle. The angle, you're moving over a curved surface of the Earth, and the curved surface of the Earth angle leads me to the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico, which is right here. We may as well come all the way in on it. There it is. The most significant pyramid in Mexico is the Pyramid of the Sun right here. And continuing along the line, we come to Tepeyac Hill, which is where in 1532, I believe it is, Juan Diego receives the vision of the resurrected. I'm going to say the word resurrected because we're looking at a resurrected body of Mary appears in December 12, 1531. And the year 1531. And December 12th in that year was winter solstice. Yes, our calendar has migrated that much. It's now December 22nd, 21st. So this is the same angle of resurrection that the ancient Egyptians knew about. Now, it's not, this is Tepeyac Hill, and this is the church where 25 million people will visit every year to see the tilma, the image of Mother Mary printed on the tilma, the cactus fibers, again, at this angle. Why is this happening? Because they're tracking something in the heavens at this angle that rises and sets, and we don't know what it is. We don't know what it is. Now, when I did my calculations, without showing the math, which is quite stunning to the distance of the angle of resurrection to Mexico, it's ruled by the planet Jupiter. When I come to the birth site of Jesus, that means it's the highest percentage in the harmony of the order of the planets. We come to the birthplace of Jesus, it's ruled by Jupiter. We come to so many locations, and now my new line, this brown line at the bottom, I want to go over because it appears to be exactly 10 degrees from the pyramid. And this is going to take me to the birthplace of the Buddha. And remember, the Buddha's birth date, we've gone over this in the inner circle, is in harmony with the ascension date and period of the planet of the ascension of Jesus Christ, which is May, right? Remember, Mother Mary appeared to the three children of Fatima on the 13th of May, and the Buddha's birthday is in May, in the window. And the Buddha's birthday is, this is where the Buddha was born in the year 623 BCE. I've been to India and I've been to the Bodhi tree, and that is the date on the tree. And again, the Buddha is born in the time period almost exactly the same year as the prophet, two of the biblical prophets. And I don't want to make a mistake because I don't have that chart in front of me, but I think it's Ezekiel and Daniel, but I have to double check. They're born exactly the same time, and they're probably born. I need to check the angle of where those prophets were born. But Buddha is born at 10 degrees, and so 10 degrees to the east, 10 degrees off of the east-west, is 80 degrees, and the difference in 90 degrees. And what's interesting about 10 degrees, it's 136, or over 360, and 3,600 years is the orbital period around the sun of the planet Nibiru, the planet of the gods. Very, very interesting how this is all coming together. Now, the last thing I want to show you, I mean, the harmony of the order calculations are so important, and I realize a lot of people can't follow the math, but it basically is an imprint that only works in feet by human design. A foot is a foot, and a 12-inch foot is a large foot, but it's certainly not the biggest foot. My shoe is a 10 and a half, but the outside of my shoe is 12 inches. So this harmony of the order measurement, when I measure from the Great Pyramid to my target, and I subtract 8 inches per mile for the curvature of the Earth, and I take my number repeatedly divided by the golden ratio, I get percentage value accuracies for the planets. And when I did this calculation to the France line, let me show you this, of Mary Magdalene. Here it is. When we did the France line, so I measured from the Great Pyramid to the location where Mother Mary got off her boat and what became France. I start with my master number, minus 8 inches per mile. And all these numbers on the left are, I'm just dividing by the golden ratio and coming down, coming down, coming down. And you can see that when I get to Uranus, I'm at 92.84% accuracy to its orbit, 97.45% Saturn, Jupiter 96%, right? And these other percentages, 97.45, or is for the orbit of the planet angels, archangels, virtues, dominions, thrones, etc. But when we measure to Mary Magdalene's location, she's in high harmony. Look at Earth, 97.45% for Earth. That's incredible. Her measurement of where she gets off the boat, and Mercury for her distance is the highest harmony, which is the messenger planet. So we can actually see what's at play from above, from the view of the heavens above. The imprint on the ground and the harmony of the order says that she was ruled by the messenger, so therefore receiving messages, the archangel Gabriel, who is Hermes, one and the same, guiding her ship, her boat, with her followers and some of the children of hers and allegedly Christ, getting off the boat to establish a new Christian order in what would later become France. And notice it's later become France. Note for the French that the name of God is I am, and the way the French pronounce I am is je suis, which is Jesus. If you just drop the I, it's Jesus. I am is Jesus, which is, again, the J was added. Jesus's name does not have a J. It's only a 4-letter name. And we've gone over the name of Christ. So now we go to the same angle as Mary Magdalene's angle, all the way to the Pyramid of the Sun at Mexico, and we calculate the harmony of the order. And again, when we look at it, Saturn is at almost 95% accuracy. Jupiter is at 99.95%. So that is clearly in harmony, perfect harmony to Jupiter being the chief god of the Romans and the Greeks, which is very interesting. Why also Jesus's birth does something very similar to this. So why is Jupiter so powerful in the harmony of the order? It's really, really incredible. So anyway, in the inner circle, we have one more week. We're doing the frequencies. I'll show you where we are. And again, just so we have this clear, when we're doing these frequencies as ratios between Earth to these targets, we are affecting human consciousness and our own consciousness being attuned to these locations. And I just want to show you where we are. Remember, we're on principalities. The measurement of the depth of 2 kilometers to this of the cylinder coils underneath Khafre's pyramid are within 6,554.29 feet, and 1 foot is equal to 1 day. So the position of this upper 9 angelic planets is in perfect harmony to the measurement of those coils under the Giza Plateau, the Giza Plateau. So let's see. I just want to look at those coils again. We go to where I have it in a folder here. Here. And we go to these amazing coil structures here. These coils, the math on this is really incredible. It's all by perfect design. To say that 2 kilometers in feet is 6,554, which is the number of the position we are at for principalities, which means that's how many days it takes for that upper hyperdimensional angelic planet to go around the sun once, that these cylinders are producing the same number in feet. So to say that these are harmonic resonators is an understatement underneath the Great Pyramid. They are perfectly attuned to the harmony of the order. Because if I take this measurement in feet, and of course I keep dividing it by the golden ratio, I'm going to get Earth, I'm going to get Venus, I'm going to get Jupiter, Saturn, and I'm going to get my solar system again to degrees of accuracy and percentages. There's no such thing as 100%, although we're pretty close on our measurement to the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico at the resurrection angle. We're at 99.95% accuracy, which is really stunning. So remember, so next week we're going to go into the when events on the Earth are entangled over distances, they can demonstrate the harmony of the order. So we can see the harmony of the order at play on the surface of the Earth. So with that, have a great week. We're one more week on the frequencies, and we'll be moving to the next set later on.
Thank you.